Good day, ladies and gents, wherever you.
I get the feeling StreamYard just screwed us because that's life. So, good afternoon, morning, evening, what have you. Apparently, I, Don the Pleb, will just be running Iron Duke's channel for probably the next minute or two. And even better, I don't have chat open. So I'm going to give as brief an introduction as I can and give this back to Duke the moment he gets back. But he watched a couple of political commentators start talking about the war in Ukraine and with Russia, right? And it turns out that most political commentators, when it comes to actual war things, are just talking out of their ass. They have no idea what they're talking about. They don't know how the military works. They don't know much of anything, really. And so we were sitting bitching about this in a set of DMs, and there was some discussion about how we should stop and talk about this sort of thing, because basically every major content creator out there that is talking about this war is just spewing BS. And ironically, in my opinion, most of the BS is a reflection of a ton of propaganda, which all of these people spend all of their life telling you not to listen to.
Sorry about that, guys. I have this weird microphone, which is not a bad microphone, and it actually cost me quite a lot of money. But if I touch the cable, it cuts me off completely, which is weird. So apologies to Don and also the people watching. Look, this is an impromptu stream. I've just been getting fucked off with all the nonsense I've been hearing from people about basic military stuff that's going on in Ukraine. And to be clear, I don't care who runs Ukraine, to be honest. I don't think it's a vital Western interest at all. But on the other hand, when I hear people like Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum and George Soros saying that they support Ukraine, and all of the Western liberal lefty mainstream media, that kind of doesn't make me big Ukrainian fan. So,
right? How come all the people I hate really like you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. And like I've been following Don the Pleb here, who, for anyone who doesn't know, is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran. I've been following his channel for a long time, and I've seen him do a couple of quite epic talks about when people go on about drones and so on. And like, drones can't do most fucking things in the military. Whatever the TV tells you, they're just lying.
See, this has been that particular subject has been like a bugaboo of mine for a bunch of years, because one, people always talk like, "Oh, if there's a civil war, the U.S. government's just going to drone strike everything." Like, well, probably not. No. I mean, if you set up a machine gun nest in the middle of the field, they will drone strike your ass. However, if you're on Main Street, USA, big city thing, they probably won't.
Yep. Robert Verlinden in the chat saying, biggest thing people don't understand is supply. Yeah, all right. I mean, it's long been said that professionals talk about logistics and everyone else talks about everything else. But yeah, absolutely. Logistics is why there was never any chance of Western people being boots on the ground in Ukraine. We can't do that.
Oh, man. So this was a discussion I was having on day one, because people were like, yeah, man, we're going to go fight a war over there. And I was like, okay, look, maybe, but it's a really bad idea because, don't get me wrong, it is a logistics miracle to be able to fight a war in two different landlocked countries 8,000 miles from your borders. It is. And whether anyone appreciates that or not, the simple fact that at no point did the U.S. military run out of bullets or food or water, I mean, it's a logistics miracle.
Yeah.
But here's the thing.
And that, of course, is fighting countries that basically didn't have an air force, certainly after the first few rounds.
Exactly, right? Because it turns out if your opponent's like, hey, that C-130, that'll be enough of that thing.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
You start to have problems.
No, it's not even an air force. It's even surface to air missiles.
right? Because, like, don't get me wrong, a handful of times in 20 years, helicopters went down, or planes took fire, what have you.
Of course they do, yeah.
And it was, but they used RPGs and they took out helicopters. Like, well, okay, one, you need to understand that that's basically the RPG's job. Is you can hand it to anybody anywhere on Earth, and it is a rocket propelled grenade that blows stuff up. Two, the American military uses an ass ton of air power. All right, just metric schmoes. And
Don, I know you like that series. What was it called? Generation Kill or something?
Yeah.
And there's a bit in there where there's some American Air Force aircraft going over, and one of the NCOs turns around and says to his dudes, he says, "They're not our friends. That's the American Air Force."
And they kill Marines. Yeah. So the Air Force and the Marine Corps have had a touchy history, but what are you going to do? This is the other thing about air power, right? Is that if you have relatively defined battle lines, right? You're even across the street from me. I can get a gunship to come down and start launching Hellfire missiles at you, right? Because the blast radius is not giant. Now, it's still probably not good for my health. I will get peppered with shrapnel if I'm not, somewhere that will absorb shrapnel between me and you. But still, you could do it if you really had to. All this, like, hey, why isn't Russia just carpet bombing kind of thing, right? Because that's not how bombs work. All right. People see like grenade explosions and they're like, that's a bomb. And I'm like, no, that's a grenade. Bombs make really big booms. Grenades make really tiny booms. And I realized that if you've never seen modern ordnance, right? You're like, oh my God, that M203 grenade launcher, you could like take out a building with it. Like, well, first of all, no. I mean, like, your arm will fall off. That 203 grenade launcher will fall off that M16. You will die of old age. Your children will come by, pick up that M16, duct tape it back together, and it will fall apart, and that building will still be there, okay?
Yeah.
Anything bigger than
concrete,
right? Anything bigger than a taco stand. That's what's happening. Got it? On the other hand, drop a daisy cutter on that building, and there's a good chance you don't have a building anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, I totally agree. One of the things that came up in a stream I was watching recently, and look, I've been watching Black Pigeon Speak streams with his guests, and they've actually been not bad, certainly for the politics. But he doesn't really have anyone on there who knows anything about military, which is the weakness of it. And for example, there were loads of people in the chat earlier today going on about because the Russians have not taken the whole of Ukraine in 4 days, which is ridiculous, but because they haven't taken the whole of Ukraine in 4 days, they're saying, is heavy armor now out of date? And wouldn't you be better with light armor? Because heavy armor will get killed just as easily as light armor. And I've seen these bollocks for years, and it's just crap.
Okay, so in one very specific instance, that statement is true, which is to say, if you are facing down people who have very specific weapon systems designed to take out tanks. Now, if you are fighting the U.S. military, you are fighting those people. And we will just crap javelins all over you until you don't have armor anymore. That's what we'll do.
And toes and all that.
Right. And after that, we'll start to break out stuff no one's even seen on planet Earth in 30 years because we don't have to fight armor very often, right? Artillery will start breaking out dual-purpose improved combat munitions, which is basically a shell that goes up in the air and drops a bunch of grenades, right? And it's slightly more complicated than that, but that's really what it is. And it exists solely to take out columns of armor, right? And look, if you are rolling against the U.S. military, you better expect all of that. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a bunch of people who are like, hey, but we're pumping American weapons in there. And true as that is, if we, I mean, I think it was day 2. I said, if we don't keep pumping javelins in there, these guys are dead. Right? It's that simple.
Yeah. Well, I know the Brits sent the Ukrainians. I think it was 2,000. I can't remember what they're called now. Not javelins. They're kind of like a modern version of the Charlie G, but they're not. They're a guided missile that can do top attacks. Yeah, and they claim you can fire this in a room. And I said to people, well, look, I'm not firing any shoulder-held missile with anything behind me ever. And I think anyone who does is an idiot.
Yeah.
But, go for it if you want.
Hey, you know what? It took me all of once watching an AT-4 fire before I was like, that backblast area clear thing, that's not a joke.
And when you fire one, it's like getting hit in the face with a cricket bat, or for Americans, a baseball bat.
Right. I mean, it's not kind.
When you fire. Right. No, it's not. It's not a gentle weapon. I mean, not saying it's not effective, but it's not a gentle weapon.
No.
And Robert Verlinden is correct. They're NLAWs is what these things are called. But they have a range of 400 yards. And like the tank's main armament can kill you at 2 miles quite easily with a HE shell of some description. And their machine guns can kill you 1,000 yards. And you've got to be 400 yards before you can fire this thing with any real chance of hitting the enemy tank.
Right. You can ambush the hell out of people, which is clearly what they're doing. And they are having some success. On the other hand, look, there are not very many maps of Ukraine that show held battle space, right? And the ones that are out there do not suggest this is going well for the Ukraine. No. Just like, and all kinds of people I've watched basically everybody like, Ukraine is kicking ass and taking names. And I went, Putin basically ran directly to the river that divides Ukraine in half and then stopped.
Yep.
Now, look, there is some argument that on the north side of the country, he is still having some problems. He is still having some regular fighting. Keep in mind that that's where Kiev is. So that's probably where, at the beginning of this, the Ukrainian military was something like 250,000 strong active duty. You want to bet that 75,000 of them are up there by Kiev,
Yep. Very likely. I mean, look, the point I was trying to make to people that people just don't get is as I don't know if we said this online now because we were chatting before we started, but Ukraine is a fucking big country.
Yeah,
it's. I think Don said it's about the size of Texas. Yeah,
give or take.
You're right, and I reckon the whole of the U.S. Marine Corps would find it difficult to take all of Texas in 4 days.
Right. I mean, it's just a lot of space.
Yeah,
and that's just what it is, right? And look, there's. Not only do you actually physically have to drive that distance, you have to maintain enough supply lines to be able to get a tank that far, because it turns out that's a ton of fuel, which, by the way, is one of those things that is coming out on a pretty regular basis, is that the Russians are outrunning their fuel supply lines, and this is where all these videos of tanks parked on the side of the road out of gas comes from. Look, that's the logistical problems are very real, but if the problem is their tanks are parked on the side of the road, if all these videos exist, which they do, then those tanks aren't being destroyed. They're just parked on the side of the road. All right.
Yeah. And I mean, look, Sailaway has made a good point here. Tanks need close support infantry to flush out not so much lone wolf ambush predators, but ambushes. And if you're going along a forest track in Ukraine, with an armored column, like say armored tanks and maybe infantry fighting vehicles and all this kind of shit. Yep. You can't go at the full speed of those vehicles because you have to first of all look out for mines, and you secondly have to look out for ambushes. So if you go 50 miles in 2 days, you're doing all right.
Yeah, I mean this is the other thing is. if you are anywhere that you know the enemy is nearby, you don't just have infantry in carriers, right? In personal carriers. You literally are moving at walking speed, 6 miles an hour, right? Because there's a guy doing a satellite patrol. He's hanging out, 30, 40 feet from the side of the tank or whatever, visibility and road distance permits to be in a good position to patrol. And that guy is walking you through shit, right?
Yeah. He's got the worst job.
Yeah.
He's up there to get shot, basically. He's doing reconnaissance by being shot or shot at. But being shot at is probably more accurate. But yeah.
Always the hope, right?
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, that's why I don't know. Like sometimes, like the newer people who are not mates get given that job. It's just the way it works. But
yeah,
and the Russians are plainly not trying to kill larger numbers of Ukrainian civilians. There were traffic jams miles long going into Poland and these places that the Russians could have bombed the shit out of if they really wanted to kill loads of civilians.
Right.
They plainly don't.
So this is, again, I don't think people really understand what the power of modern militaries looks like, right? If I am in Putin's shoes and I absolutely do not care about civilian casualties, and I roll up to the edge of Kiev, and the moment I get there, every window lights up with AK fire, and every horrible thing that has ever, happened in a war zone begins happening. Molotov cocktails come flying out of the sky, and blah, 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 whatever, right? Okay, roll the tanks back, quarter mile, all right? Yeah. Set up a nice line, and just go get me the artillery. Right.
Yeah.
Start the air raids and start the cannons, and stop when they stop shooting back.
Yeah. I mean, even the infantry can hit them with mortars and fuck knows what else.
Exactly.
And a lot of the modern anti-tank weapons also have a version that you can use against buildings, etc.
Yeah. Basically, well, if you want to just blow a city off the face of the earth, we are 100% capable of doing it. Post about 1950, right? There was some serious advances made in World War II, and then they got a little bit better around Korea, Vietnam era, and then after that, if you wanted to get rid of a city, you just get rid of a city. That's it. You got that thing, no more.
You can turn it into a big pile of rubble. It wouldn't be like Stalingrad, which was gradually turned into a big pile of rubble between two great big forces.
Right.
It would happen much more quickly these days.
Oh, in a day, right? Yeah. I mean, when I say a day, I mean a legit 24-hour period. If you said bomb that city off the face of the earth by noon tomorrow, and it was noon, you could do it.
Yeah. And Don, you're an ex-artillery guy. I think it would be legitimate to say that Russia probably has one of the more stronger artillery arms in the world, and a pretty good for a full-on battle artillery doctrine.
Yeah. So, God, this is like a ridiculously long-form discussion. One, they do, to the best of my knowledge, still have towed artillery, though I will grant I have not autistically scoured.
They find out. They have 122 millimeter, 130 millimeter these days is their little gun. Then they have 155 millimeter, and then they have 203 millimeter stuff.
Yeah,
and beyond that, of course, all their rocket artillery.
So the rocket artillery is. This is the most interesting part of this to me, right? Because Russia, for 50 years, has thought that rocket artillery truck, multiple launch rocket system strapped to the back, is just the greatest thing since sliced bread. When they were in Afghanistan, they were using those things every 15 minutes, right? Because just any engagement, one, they are super mobile. Two, they're not actually tanks, so you can gun it with those things and really scoot from one portion of the battlefield to the other, right? And three, you can launch rockets drop it back and drive effectively, and be gone before any return fire could ever get to you. And that, by the way, is not a thing that artillery is particularly good at.
And
all
also,
things
of
considered.
course, this artillery is mostly proof against like standard machine gun bullets and this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean the trucks are armored enough, so like if you had a 50 cal slap rounds, you could probably rip it to pieces, but you have to know where it was going to be.
And it would have to be like at least that. It would like a 7.62 ain't gonna go for it.
Yeah, probably not, right? Like, I mean, you'd be dead. Somebody'd have to have a window open. You'd have to be shooting through that, and that don't count, right? And so,
exactly,
these things basically every time Russia has engaged anything ever are all over the place. And other than one training video of these things being used, and as far as I can tell, it's a pretty old training video, right? I can't find one of these things hanging out readily engaging in Ukraine. Now, I've had some people who, there's a couple of videos of like, oh, this truck is, dumps some rockets at something. But again, this would be like if you saw the American military go into a fight without helicopters or jets, right? Yeah. Or there was only one, right? No one would believe we were serious. No one would believe we were trying to really destroy anything. We'd all be like, but you're the air power doctrine country. What are you doing? Yeah. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's this is going to bring us on to the next thing, drones, for fuck's sake. I think most Western civilians got a very, very, really weird idea of what drones can and cannot do.
Yeah.
Even for Western military forces, like there are things drones can do, sure, but like even for the Americans, with all the money that they spend on this kind of crap, there are loads of things that fucking drones cannot do.
So probably the first thing that people really need to understand about drones is the thing that drones give you is intelligence. They give you a really great, really quick picture of the battlefield. Like, I mean, you can get like Google Maps of where enemy forces are and all kinds of crazy stuff. And with maybe a 10-second delay, which is like the fastest thing that has ever happened in the world of knowing exactly where every opponent is in the battlefield ever. And that's amazing. However, like, oh, dude, what we're going to do is we're going to drone strike and kill that one guy in the middle of a city. No, you ain't.
One bloke with an AK-47 will use a drone.
Right. And look, do drones drop big bombs? Yeah, they do. Oh, Don, but what about like the Predator and it drops like the, like mini nukes? Like, yes, mini nuke. If you want a city still standing, you don't drone strike it. Because, I mean, you're not going to rip down every building or anything, but you will have made it unlivable almost instantly if you just start drone striking a city.
Yeah. I mean, I watched this stuff. Like, I remember lots of film of the British Army and the Royal Marines and the American Army and the US Marine Corps doing patrols, with like platoons and setting up roadblocks and basic infantry shit, which you have to do. And like, didn't matter how many drones you had, you still had to do that shit.
Yeah. Every couple of years we get to this idea that all war is gonna boil down to some sort of automated high technology thing, and you hear Biden talking about it. We have over the horizon capabilities, bro. We've had over the horizon capabilities for 70 years, right? The first ICBM is pretty old. All right. And that's pretty far over the horizon.
Well, carrier aircraft can do over the horizon and stuff, for fuck's sake.
Right. Like, do you have any idea what you're talking about? And it turns out no matter, and Clinton tried this with like, we're just going to smart bomb into houses and that will just take care of everything. And guess what? That didn't take care of anything. right? Like
killed a lot of civilians, though.
Right? Hey, we know this guy that we want dead is in this house.
And Obama was even worse. He killed huge numbers of civilians with these drones.
Right. Which, by the way, speaks to another thing that absolutely is killing me about this, right? Is basically every point thus far is if they wanted to kill civilians, they'd just be slaughtering civilians wholesale.
Yeah.
And they're not. Right now, you can complain to me about collateral damage and how that term is just churching up killing people that you didn't mean to, because you're using explosives in war in a way that is too dangerous. First of all, I would suggest to you that you have no idea what the hell you're talking about. That's not actually how it works. Second of all, the civilians that I keep seeing killed, and because there's a bunch of video from all the CCTV footage that's all over the place that everybody has a smartphone, blah, 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 right? Girl's riding her bike down the street, right? This is the one everybody was crying about this afternoon.
Yeah.
And around lands, and she dies, right? Now, for those of you who have never shot artillery, to be able to shoot artillery in the indirect fashion, which is what you're thinking of when you're thinking of artillery, which is to say they didn't just point a cannon at a thing directly in front of them and go, get rid of that, right? To shoot indirect fire, basically, at a minimum, you have about 20 seconds time of flight. Now, time of flight means from the time that someone push button or pull string or whatever it is that they're doing on their artillery system, from that exact second, it takes 20 seconds to get to wherever it's going.
And people can go into that zone in that time.
Indeed, right? Now, 20 seconds may not sound like a lot, but go ride a bike for 20 seconds and figure out how far you get. It's pretty far in the world of how close she was to that round.
Several hundred yards.
Right. Just the time of flight is 20 seconds. Somebody had to call that mission. Somebody had to process that mission. Somebody had to convey that mission to a gun line. That gun line had to load that round. All of this is like, even for really fast guys, probably 2 or 3 minutes, right? Yeah. And the best case scenario is 2 or 3 minutes. Now, get on a bike and ride for 2 or 3 minutes, and you tell me whether or not they intended to kill that girl.
Well, you're going to go a mile.
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 minutes on a bike. If you're pedaling average speed, you're going to go over a mile.
Right? And you're telling me that what? They predicted where she was going to be to within, it looks like about 20 feet, right? 6, 7 meters, right?
It was an accident, which happens all the time in wartime.
Right. And this is an impossible thing to prevent. Literally impossible. And the only way to prevent it is to literally never fire artillery, which is not a viable option for war, right? No. On the other hand, the implication here is that they are indeed going out of their way not to just smoke people.
Well, yeah. I mean, do you know Coach Red Pill, Don?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of Coach Red Pill, but I do think that his recent videos, because he's like in Kiev, I believe, although his family's somewhere else, and if I was him, I'd be trying to get back to my family, but that's just me. But yeah, maybe he just can't, which is, fair enough. I don't know his total situation, but I'm not the biggest fan of Coach Red Pill, but like he's sitting in Kiev in a hotel, and sending out videos and they've got electricity, they've got water, they've got internet. If the Russians wanted to cut those things off, they would have been cut off.
That's another thing, right? So targeting infrastructure, right? You're not supposed to do it, but if you're just going to plow over a country, hey, that looks like a substation, shoot it. Yeah. Like, I don't even care if we stop. Just everyone, guns left. Yeah. Everybody shoot at once. It's not going to be working, right?
Yeah.
And guess what? Then nobody for 20 miles around wherever you are has power, and that's not happening.
Yeah, the Russians are doing that on purpose, absolutely on purpose. And anyone who claims they're not, like, one of the things that's really fucking me off about this stuff. And as I said, I'm going to repeat it again. I don't really care who runs Ukraine. Right? Yeah. I don't think it's a vital Western interest in any way, shape, or form. But when every single one of the lefty liberal media, the mainstream media, is turning around and saying how wonderful Ukraine is and how Putin is the next formation of the Austrian painter, etc., etc., you know they're lying. Because if the Russians were anything like that, no one in these Ukrainian cities would have electricity, water. They certainly wouldn't have internet. I mean, for fuck's sake.
Well, so the internet thing is now we've all attributed to Elon Musk. The only reason anyone is anywhere is because he put up the satellite internet wall, and so
try and connect to that.
Right,
try and connect to it.
The whole country is connecting to what 50 satellites? Like, come on.
Yeah.
And by the way, still like playing video games and shit. Come on, that's not how that works, right? You know, and for anyone who has never dealt with satellite internet, the delays are massive. All right. And there's nothing you can do about it. That signal just has to go too far. And so you end up with massive delays. And so, like, just listening to Coach Red Pill earlier, somebody posted his stream with Jean-Francois Gariepi, right? And they are having a conversation, which tells me he's not on satellite internet, right? Because the conversation's flowing way too smooth. You don't have, 30-second delays in responses. They're not on satellite internet. The end.
I mean, what we're getting is people telling us, Russia can't afford to rebuild the country after they conquer it, and that's why they're not destroying everything. I don't think that's true at all. I would say the two reasons that Russia is not engaging in great battles in the Ukrainian cities. One is they don't want to lose loads of their own guys, because that would be kind of sensible. And the other one is they know damn well that if they kill a load of civilians, that's going to play directly into the biased and vile and totally dishonest Western media.
Well, let's say for a minute that the excuse is accurate, right? Like they don't have the money to rebuild it. Okay, fine. All you have done is given me the reason that they're not killing civilians.
Yeah. But they're not killing civilians, which is, I guess, if you're a Western person, probably a good thing.
Yeah. I mean,
listen, don't get me wrong. I don't think for one single second that British or American forces in Iraq or Afghanistan deliberately wanted to kill civilians. I think a lot of civilians got killed because that's what happens in war.
So I tell this story every now and again. I'm going to insist on doing it forever. When I was in Afghanistan, all artillery, all American artillery, got shut down for about a week, right? Wouldn't let any of us shoot anything. And the reason for this was there was a patrol of some kind going through a city, and they started taking fire from a building. And so they all did exactly what you would expect. If they couldn't, right? Yeah, they got away from the building. They set up defensive positions, and then they went, look, it's a big giant rock building. We're going to be ripping this thing to pieces for the next hour. There are no civilians left because we've been having a gunfight for 20 minutes. Blow it up, right? Called in GPS guided munition to make sure that they hit the target they wanted. Blew up that building as much as you could absolutely hope for. Everybody inside dead, right? They bring in, the investigators, right? Which the initial investigator is just a grunt who called for artillery. Goes over there and goes, okay, what happened? Is this building actually clear? Can we proceed? Can we do medevacs? Can we get back to, doing our damn job? And what they find is that there are a bunch of civilians in this building.
Yeah. What an amazing surprise.
Right. And they go, damn it. And so sure enough, time to make the call. Oh my God, we might have just wasted a bunch of civilians. Somebody get over here and take a look at this, because if we try and hide it, it's Haditha, and we don't want to be those guys, right? And so they bring in the investigators. The UN loses their mind, is like, oh my God, American military wasting whole building full of civilians. Turns out that what happened is ISIS grabbed a bunch of civvies, shot him in the forehead, and left him in the back of the building, and then started an engagement out of the building.
Yeah.
And so when they called for Artie, despite that all those people had 7.62 rounds in their forehead, Artie strikes are kind of destructive. So I don't know, man. There's a lot of bullet holes and a lot of torn up bodies, and these people do not look like fighters. But the UN's out there talking about how Americans are killing civilians. In the end, the reality, and by the way, numbers never changed. As far as I know, those civilians that I am talking about right now are still listed on the casualties of war because Americans do collateral damage things, right? Never changed. Still there. But in the end, turns out ISIS is a bunch of bastards who do horrible things.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can have 10 blokes in a building who are firing at you, and 200 civilians underneath them if it's a high-rise building,
right?
And what do you expect your soldiers to do?
And
are they just supposed to die?
So, for a ton of these people, the answer is yes. Well, they shouldn't have been there in the first place. So, yes, they should just die. And I was like, that is never how this is going to work. No. Ever. Right? No. All those times where you go and you ask veterans or active duty guys, and like, are you fighting for your country? And they're like, I mean, not really in the moment. I'm fighting for like that guy because that guy is fighting for me. Right? Yep.
It's a group of mates. Absolutely correct. The military has understood this going back to Roman or even ancient Greek times. You have a group of blokes who are mates, and you fight for each other.
Yeah. And
you might have joined because you wanted to fight for your country and what have you, but at the end of the day, you end up fighting for your mates.
Right that minute, how is it going to look to American foreign policy correspondents if I shoot this guy that just shot my friend in the face? Has never been said by anyone. All right.
No, absolutely not. No, it's just bollocks, and it's unrealistic bollocks as well.
Right.
Don, I've got to go and do something for like 3 minutes. Could you please, if you can remember what it was, do your talk on drones and all the things they fucking cannot do to the modern military?
Sure. So I did not assemble all of the notes about drones, but I've been angrily giving this talk to everyone who will listen for as long as I possibly could. So there is this idea that all wars will end up fought with things like drones or ICBMs because they are very heavily destructive, and they are. And they have a great capability to do some very specific things. But very much like artillery was supposed to be the end of the grunt. And by the way, that was a discussion that was had in the 19th century. Well, we might as well just have all these artillery guns do all our fighting for us because they're so destructive. It doesn't matter what technology you put in that position. Guy on the front line with a rifle needs to be in places to hold territory. He needs to be in places to move equipment. He needs to be in places to clear the way for whatever your equipment is. And I can hear all the drone junkies now. Don, but you can fly a Predator drone for 24 hours, which means you could fly one from the middle of Europe into Ukraine. Okay, fine. Let's say that that's what you're doing. You fly your Predators over. You have no capability to hold territory. You can bomb the hell out of a thing until you run out of bombs. 30 seconds later, somebody else can walk in and take that territory. You have no capability to hold it. You have no capability to enforce who travels through that area. And because of that, you could provide no physical security of any variety, right? And so if you are just bombing the hell out of things and even then sending your own guys through, right? Like you're just sending a convoy of people with water. Those guys have no security of any variety. They are perfect targets, that your UN peacekeeping force or whatever that is just providing aid. The Red Cross is going through there. Doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter what it is. You have no control over that of any variety. And this, in its entirety, is why drones cannot fight every single war and every single aspect for all of time, even though everybody wants them to, right? To actually be able to hold territory takes a ton of manpower, right? Because worth noting, every post you've ever seen in the military, with some very, very safe place exceptions, is 2 guys at least, right? And there's very good reason for that. Basically comes down to, if you snipe one guy in the face, there's still somebody else to pick up a radio and go, hey, we're being attacked, right? And that matters. Equally speaking, those 2 guys cannot just stay in that post for 24 hours. They don't just live there, right? You need multiple shifts, even if it's only 2, even if they're doing 12 on, 12 off in that thing, they still got to stop, eat, sleep, do whatever it is, right? Furthermore, to all the civilian casualty discussion that has been going on in every war in all of time, you know what actually produces the least civilian casualties, whether anybody wants to believe it or not, is the infantry. They do not go out of their way to just hose people down. Right now, do they have the capability? Yes, I know. So, oh, darn, but Vietnam and that stupid little town, and they were just blowing up the whole town. Do you know why you're talking about that? Because it's so rare that your last example is Vietnam, right? When I said Haditha earlier, a whole bunch of people have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. And Haditha was not a bunch of grunts going in and wasting a town. It was a bunch of grunts going in and wasting individual people saying, I know one of you knows who killed my friend. Now, that right there, even if it is horrible, and I'm not here to tell you that it's not, fine, think of that whatever you want, don't care. I'm not here to tell you the morality of it. But even when the infantry went in deciding to waste people, they did it with more precision than a drone will ever do, right? This brings me to the other point. There is no capability of any variety, no matter how good drones are, right? It just gave the speech. What they do is they give you situational awareness. I know that you have a machine gun nest there. I know you have a tank there. I know you, whatever it is. I know because I have thing in the sky. On the other hand, there is no infantry anywhere on the planet that, how do I put this? We're all, the moment you start to have guys on the ground, we're all a little superstitious, right? One guy in the squad gets a bad gut feeling, whole patrols will turn on somebody's gut feeling. Why? Because what really happens, the way this really works, and the military is very convinced of this. Everyone that I've ever met is very convinced. That guy might not know that out of the corner of his eye, he saw a wire sticking out of the ground, but he knows he saw something, or he knows that something is wrong, and everybody will stop and find that wire. We'll find the mine that is planted in the ground in front of you, etc. Whatever it is. And this happens, I don't care what war you're talking about, don't care what battle space, happens 1,000 times a week. All right?
Always better safe than sorry. Always.
Right, because the consequences of doing that wrong is 12 guys dying, right?
Yeah.
And but we can churn out, more people, blah, blah, blah. Look at, World War II and how many people got drafted.
That isn't the way a squad or a section or even a platoon looks at it.
Nope. And you will never find guys that do, right?
Because you're mates. You go out drinking with each other on the weekend when you're not doing active stuff,
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And your mate is the most important person to you.
Right. And this is, again, I don't care if, McNamara was over there, with his McNamara's morons that is getting a bunch of press all of a sudden. And he thinks that, we should just waste people because, hey, we got more. So to hell with it, just draft them. The guy who wrote the book, McNamara's Morons, is writing the book because he went to boot camp with one of those guys and was like, I got to know this guy and I didn't think that he should be there. And I thought the whole program was wrong because I had a personal investment. That's a guy that he solely went to boot camp with. And as far as I can tell, never saw him again. Right.
Yeah.
But you think those guys are the ones who were like, yeah, just waste the front squad. Come on.
Yeah, absolutely. Don, look, you're an ex-USMC guy.
Yeah.
What did you think of the movie Full Metal Jacket?
So it is absolutely great for the opening. I mean,
the training bit, yeah.
Yeah, it's basically boot camp,
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good.
A lot of the stuff that happens after that gets, let's say, wishy-washy. Could I see a guy with a peace sign right next to Born to Kill on his helmet? Yeah, I could see that.
Someone might think that's funny, yeah.
Right. And by the way, if you are one of the people who is like, oh my God, that's ridiculous. Like, well, look, man. Yeah. And that's how ridiculously stressful jobs go. It's all dark humor, right?
Bear in mind, these are like 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old blokes. And not all 18 to 21-year-old blokes are the brightest tools in the shed. So, they do some shit sometimes.
By the way, your 21-year-old guy, that's the mature guy. Right?
Yeah, absolutely right.
That's the one with experience. He's been around for a while, right?
Don, I tell you, we had an NBC corporal, nuclear, biological, chemical corporal, which every platoon back then had. No, was it platoon? No, every company had back then. And this wank used to go around going, gas, gas, gas all the time. And you'd have to suddenly stick your respirator on and all this shit, And so one evening, when he was out, we got his bed, his bedside cabinet, his photograph of his ugly wife, and we stuck them all on the armory roof. And eventually, there was loads of shit. There were NCOs and even 1 or 2 officers wandering around. And of course, we were all in bed. We knew nothing about this.
Right.
It was just revenge.
And that is how the military works, right? Or start duct taping people's gear together, right?
Yeah.
Like your body armor, your everything, right? Just roll it in a big ball of duct tape and be like, this is the kind of thing that happens, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And is that the? And by the way, this is the thing that kills me when people talk about like, oh man, our military is so professional and they can like get over any behavioral problem, and I'm like, how many of these guys do you know? Because look, don't get me wrong, no one is in the middle of a firefight tying your shoelaces together. That's not happening, right? But if you fall asleep on post, someone is tying your shoelaces together, and then they're running up behind you and screaming at the top of their lungs. And that is the most gentle response you'll get, right? Because, I'm sure that no one is allowed to do any of the things that actually happen. But if you fall asleep on post and get butt stroked, like, I would not be surprised.
Oh, man, I remember a dude who lost a 7.62 SLR magazine, which is like, the UNFN. And he lost a 20-round magazine full of ammunition. And I watched a corporal grab him by the back of his webbing and spank his face into a mud puddle and the rocks underneath it about 25 times because you'd just given the enemy 20 rounds,
Yes.
You don't do that.
And it's, look, there's losing gear is a giant deal in the military, which, by the way, for all the,
So stealing gear.
Yeah, right.
As I'm sure you know.
So there's a bunch of videos going around right now to get us back to Ukraine of people like towing APCs and stuff with their tractors. Now, look, no military in the world likes to lose gear because no military in the world has enough gear. And I don't care who you're talking to.
Yeah.
They will happily tell you they don't have enough gear because they never do. And I don't care how much gear you think is enough. You're probably wrong, and they also probably don't have that.
Yeah.
And I say that as a guy from the country that everyone is more than happy to talk about. We spend 80 quadrillion times as much, money on gear and the military in general as everybody else. And true as that might be, you'd be surprised how often. So the battalion has one wrench that is required to repair this thing. And this thing is required to do our job. So you have to check it out personally from somebody and return it personally, right? I bet he didn't lose his mag again.
Yeah, no, he didn't. That was one lesson he learned.
And
which was the whole point of it. But of course, if you and this goes back to the stream I'm going to be doing with Don on Thursday night, This is why you don't want military. You don't want women in your military because you can't do that to them.
Nobody
you just can't.
Nobody would tolerate. I mean, and look, for all you feminists out there, who invariably the answer is going to be, well, why would you do that anyway? Why don't you just explain to them how important the gear is? Well, first of all, let me tell you right now, I couldn't get out of boot camp without hearing 50 times how important gear was. All right, that guy knew. All right?
Yeah, he learned. And particularly ammunition, which the enemy can then use to shoot you or your mates.
Yeah, because rifles, ammunition, weapon systems of any variety, right?
Yeah.
People get rightly very upset about this. And why? And you can think whatever you want of this, but like the rifle that the Marine Corps for a bunch of years was using as effectively its sniper rifle is an M24, which shoots a 7.62 round, right? Mm-hmm. And it is an order of magnitude more accurate than an AK-47 or a Dragunov or any of that other nonsense that these guys have. So when there was, and this was a real thing, the sniper of Marja, which was a big thing for a while. That guy was, or the Marja sniper, whatever the hell they called him, right? That guy was taking shots at about 300 yards, absolute maximum. The M4 that everybody carries, has a max effective range of 500 yards, right? The weapon that everybody has increases his capabilities by 200 yards. Maybe we shouldn't let him have that,
Yeah. Well, that's strange to me, Don, because I'm older than you, and when I used an SLR in the British Army, which is a 7.62 FN, but you can't fire its automatic because there's no point with the 7.62 FN because you won't hit anything. But I could hit stuff at 500-600 yards with iron sights, but I was a good shot. I have to say, I was a good shot. But and then when I was in the SDF, the R1, I think it was the same kind of thing. But the R3 was the Israeli Galil, which is a 5.56 thing. And I never liked that thing. I don't like 5.56 weapons because you're not going to hit much over about 300 yards. And if there's any sort of cover, they're not going to go through it.
The going through it is a problem. Funny enough, it does better with body armor than 7.62, but somehow or another does worse with dirt. So at least,
I mean, the British Army thing used to be that a 7.62 round, a NATO 7.62 round, which is obviously longer than the Soviet one used to be, would go through 7 foot of compact earth.
Yeah,
which I think is possibly pushing it a bit, but not by much.
Sure, but who's hiding behind 7 feet of dirt anyway, right?
Well, I don't know. When we built fire trenches, that's kind of what we were supposed to do. Was the top of that trench was supposed to be 7 foot of earth with the turf put back on top of it,
Mm-hmm.
So, not that we always did that. When
exactly.
Because, man, I nearly got into real bullshit once. Because we were doing this shit, I think it was in Denmark, if I remember correctly. We were doing an exercise in Denmark, and we knew we were going to fuck off in 2 hours. But they said, "No, you got to build a slit trench, a fire trench, for 2 blokes, and do all the normal stuff." And I thought, well, fuck this, we're going to leave it here in 2 hours. I'm hardly going to dig this in 2 hours, let alone anything else. So I scattered bits of vegetation across the top, shall we say, rather than having all this turf that I carefully rolled up that you're supposed to do and all this shit. Yep. And this officer came around who I'd never seen in my life. He wasn't anything to do with our battalion, as far as I know, but he was I think he was either a lieutenant colonel or a major, and he turned around and said, "What the fuck are you?" And I'm a private. And he turned around and said, "What the fuck are you doing?" You know. And luckily, there was this Aussie officer in his Aussie hat, who was obviously on exchange with our unit, who was following this bloke around. And this Aussie officer turned around and said to this bloke, "Oh, no, sir. I think what this man is doing, he's done this because he's getting his strength ready, but he wants it to be, what was the word? Something like, it was something like camouflage from the air." And the British major or lieutenant colonel said, "Oh, okay." And of course, I immediately said, "Yes, sir." You know,
of course,
with a great big salute, and I got away with it, which always made me very fond of Australian Army officers.
No kidding. Oh man, like, hey sir, I make private pay, but here's beer.
Yeah. And this dude, I'm not joking, as he walked away, he winked at me.
I mean, at least it's a guy that knows what's going on.
Yeah. He was a good Aussie officer, of which there used to be many. Not so sure now. I tell you, Don. Once upon a time, I was up in the Northern Territory, and I was on a little tiny island between Australia and New Guinea. And there's an Aussie Army base up there. Well, actually, it's an Aussie military base. It's tri-service, you know, Army, Air Force, Navy.
Yeah.
And he was a comms guy, and he was like quite a lot of soldiers, I think. He was an orphan, and he joined the army, and he kind of like the army was his family, you know, which happens sometimes to military dudes.
Yeah,
and
a lot.
Yeah, and he was a good, really nice bloke. He really was a nice bloke, and I knew him because his girlfriend was a nurse, and my woman at the time was a nurse up there. Yep. And he'd been up there like, I don't know, 18 months or 2 years or something, and he was due to get sent somewhere else on another posting. And so everyone said, all right, we got to have a party for him because he was leaving. And I because I'd been in the army and I was the only bloke up there apart from him who had, they got me to do a speech. And I said to this guy, "Oh, mate, you're the best type of digger." And like, for, you know, if you don't know, Don, a digger in the Australian Army is a vet. That's what it means. It means, like, you know, the guys in World War I or World War II or Korea or Vietnam or wherever they might have been. And this guy fucking shed a tear, for God's sake. He actually did. He shed a tear because I called him a really good digger.
Yeah, well, you know, there's weird thing that happens. Being good at your job matters.
Yeah, you know? Yeah. And believing in what you do, and like believing the people you're around. I mean, this is a bit, comes back to a bit what we're going to do on our stream on Thursday, is how this is being fucking destroyed by modern Western elites.
And that to the, are there any good officers left?
Junior, maybe.
Yeah. Enlisted have never been all that fond of officers, right?
Yeah, true.
But there's, you know, there comes along every now and again one that is good enough that you know, they're remembered forever, right? Regardless of whether or not the rest of the officer corps wants them to be. And if you don't believe that, go read the books about Chesty Puller. The officer corps hated that man, but the enlisted loved him, right?
That was the guy who said we're surrounded on all sides, and that means we got less of a problem because everyone's back.
Exactly, right? You know, that simplifies things.
Yeah.
We're not retreating. We're just attacking in a different direction. All this stuff, right? You know, it's all crazy Chesty quotes. But if you go read any of the stuff about him, and you can't listen to any of the officer corps stories because they're all about how he was the worst person ever born. But you know, the enlisted guys were like, look, he takes care of us. We do our job, and there's no bullshit, right? Yeah. Which For anyone who has ever been in the military, the combination of those three things is what you dream about every single day, right?
Especially the lack of bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Bullshit and hurry up and wait are the two worst things in the military.
Oh yeah.
Everyone must be here in 5 minutes, and then you sit there for 2.5 hours.
Oh yeah, there's no one, again, any military anywhere, right? Okay, so we're having unity formation, so you guys can all go home. Everybody be here in 15 minutes, right? And everyone's there in 5, right? Everyone's there, and oh, we're going home. Hey, we get to actually go do whatever the hell we want for a minute. And you sit there for 3 hours,
waiting for the guy that happens. Be there. Whatever.
Nope,
nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, we'll hear soon. No officer comes by and tells you what's happening, or if they do, they say, "Oh, well, they're still talking about it."
Yeah. Oh man. So in the world of no bullshit things, my gunny for most of the time that I was in active duty Marine Corps, about half, right? He shows up and that sort of crap is going on because that goes on everywhere, and he just starts walking out and going, "Battery attention, dismissed. See you tomorrow." This time, right? And I was doing a bunch of stuff in the office. Like I had to just fill out an ass ton of paperwork for something. I don't remember what. So I walked out of formation and back into the office, and the battery first sergeant walks out and he's like, "Where's the battery?" And Gunny goes, "I dismissed him." He's like, "Well, but like we didn't have formation." He went, "I had formation." He was like, "Well, but like we didn't get the CO out there. We didn't have formation." He went, "They've been sitting there for 2 fucking hours waiting on formation because we told them to be there 2 hours ago. So I dismissed them." Well, we had stuff we wanted to tell them. Tell them in the morning. It's fucking Marine Corps. They'll be here in the morning. And I was like,
wow.
I love you.
Affirmative Ray in the chat, who is Colin Liddell, who I like and I've streamed with a couple of times, says solid war porn stream, Andrew. No, it's not, mate. It really ain't. The one people you will not find doing war porn is people who are vets, ever. This ain't war porn. This is like realistic what goes on and what people really think. And also a little bit of correction for what civilians think goes on, because they listen to the mainstream media, which can't even fucking lie straight in bed.
I have tried a lot of times over the years, specifically to like really, really anti-war guys, to explain how these things go, right? And look, everybody's stories are a little bit different, but there's a ton of through lines, right? Like there is no one who has fired a machine gun, any machine gun, who thinks that we are out there wasting civilians just cause. Zero people that have fired a machine gun think that. Like, oh, that's how this works, right? Like, and I don't care if it's light arms kind of stuff, right? Your 240s, your saws, any of that kind of stuff. Fine. You want to go waste a room full of civilians? You walk in, you lean on the front of it, and you pull the trigger. And guess what? You turn. That's it. And everybody in that room dies. And it takes 5 seconds.
I've never known a soldier who deliberately killed civilians. I've known soldiers who accidentally did.
Yeah,
for sure, but not deliberately. Why would you?
And
you only kill people who are a threat.
And this is, that's a thing that nobody wants to hear, right? Everybody wants to hear that they turn you into a machine, right? And I come from, to the best of my knowledge, the branch most famous in the world for creating a very specific type of person when you come out of boot camp, right? The Marines know each other at 100 yards.
Don, I know full well that if you saw a baby and a mother like 50 meters in front of you, you'd immediately kill them just because.
Well, they're like, you're there, right? And even with that, right? And I've talked numerous times about the Marine Corps as a cult. People call it that. Marines call it that. We're happy to have the name. No one cares. And you know what still doesn't happen? You still can't get Marines to just go waste kids just cause. You can't. It won't happen. And I know. One time in Vietnam, right? Again, 50 years ago, one platoon did, or I forget if it was a platoon. I think it was a platoon. One platoon did this.
Yeah, it was I think, a platoon. Yeah.
And I mean, you can only stay in the military for 40 years before they kick you out here, which means literally every person who was in the military at that time is no longer in the military, right?
Yeah.
And it is an entirely new generation of people. And that, in the way the military actually has generations of people, it's probably about 100 generations of Marines have gone through there. And in 100 generations of Marines, it didn't happen again, right? It's not an accident, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, Don, there are photographs and even films of US Marines carrying Japanese kids on Okinawa.
Yeah.
Now, all right, yes, there is some propaganda in there. Of course there is, because of when it was. But on the other hand, these guys are not just fucking lying.
Right.
I'm absolutely certain they wanted to, like, completely obliterate every single Japanese soldier on that island.
Oh,
but
yeah.
They didn't want to kill Japanese kids or Japanese women, particularly.
Right.
And there's loads of photographs and film of them actually, like, carrying them away and looking after them.
Yeah. And that's not any different, you know, like the guys that I deployed with knew the local kids, right? They knew the local kids like to steal their shit too, but they knew the local kids. You know, the new local families, etc. Right? And apparently, the expectation is either that never should have happened, right? Because we should have just walked in and wasted these people and just fucking stacked bodies because reasons, or that we got to know these people and then turned around and shot them in the face just because, right? Like, come on. It's not how people work.
No, yeah, absolutely. And like, in my experience, to be fair, is like British and to some degree white South African soldiers. Like, you won't find guys who are nicer to women and kids and dogs, for example.
Oh, man.
You know?
So there was a in the world of, like, apparently I'll just bring up every Marine Corps black eye that happened in the Afghan war. There was a dude that threw a puppy off a cliff on camera.
Yeah, I've seen that video.
And you know what? The Marine Corps hunted that guy down pretty quick.
Well, I'm fucking glad they did, because I like dogs. But yeah,
right. And that's at any given time, the Marine Corps is about 180,000 people, at least now.
Yeah, it's a lot of people, and you're going to get some assholes in that number of people. Of course you will. Right.
But the other 179,999 were like, fuck that guy. You know?
Yeah. I mean, look, anywhere you go where the British Army's doing anything, you're going to find like 5 or 6 adopted dogs.
Right.
Because the guys will just start feeding them, and then they'll hang around, and then they're pets, you know?
Exactly.
Just the way.
And
the same thing will happen with kids. They'll they'll turn up, and they'll want to get a photograph with your sunglasses on, or like a used link belt around them, and all this kind of cuck.
Yep.
But, you know, most people are okay people, really.
Indeed. Though I will say, there's a thing that is going on with this that I have not heard anybody talk about, right? Which is to say that about 50% of the videos you see coming out of Ukraine are things that if Americans did, they would be in jail for war crimes.
Yeah. I know I would say at least 50% of the videos coming out of Ukraine are also propaganda from one side or the other as well. So, yeah.
But like the first or second day, a couple of Ukrainian soldiers ambushed a truck, right?
Yeah.
Which, and by the way, I am not a huge fan of war crimes. I think generally, like, okay, is it probably a good idea to be telling people, hey, don't go waste cities? Sure, fine, whatever. But as previously discussed for the past like 10 minutes, it doesn't happen anyway. But fine. Okay, cool. Don't just, go into the kindergarten and just waste people. Cool. Gotcha. Whatever. On the other hand, if you ambush a truck in the American military and you shoot the guy that is driving the truck, right? And
or
he climbs.
More often than woman these days.
Also true.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you shoot the guy driving the truck, right? And for once, somehow or another, we've been fighting a uniformed enemy. And that guy gets out of the truck and is laying on the ground dying. If you walk around that corner and you clear that guy, you shoot that guy, double tap him another couple, you're probably going to jail. Now, everyone and their brother probably heard that and went, but that sounds like a thing you do in war, which, by the way, is what basically everybody would tell you. You don't, like, just because you shot him and he's currently on the ground doesn't mean he's not dangerous. And yet, if you went over there and you killed that guy, it would be, you should have called a medevac for him. You should have been, clear his weapons and take the squad over and blah, blah, blah. You have murdered someone because he was no longer an active enemy combatant. And that's true, right? And it's true enough that for quite a while, the Taliban and ISIS and Al Qaeda and everybody we fought over there, as soon as they figured out that's how this worked, they'd walk up to a patrol, drop a magazine of AK-47, throw the AK, and throw their hands in the air. Because as soon as that weapon's out of their hand, they're no longer an enemy combatant, right?
Yeah.
And that
I also think there's a bit of a difference between like an infantry flying vehicle crew or a main battle tank crew and a truck driver.
Well, yes, right. Believe it or not, combat arms matters.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you're like a self-propelled artillery unit or a tank unit or engineers of some description who are a combat unit, which people often don't realize, or you're obviously infantry, including like armored infantry, motorized infantry, whatever. Those guys, you got to be a bit careful with those guys because those guys are actually fighting people.
Mm-hmm. And those guys are where you get all the stories of, guy up on a 50 cal, takes 15, 20 rounds and that 50 cal is still firing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I don't know if this is true, John, but like I've seen stories of like supply columns for the US Marine Corps, which generally were pretty scarce compared to the Army. I mean, but they got Humvees with 50 cals and 7.62 millimeters and 40 millimeter grenade launchers and all this kind of stuff. But those bastards would actually fight you.
So, so there's this weird thing that happens. The Marine Corps will give everybody at least a little bit of time, in the rear, right, in training with 240s, with 50s, and with Mark 19s, right. And when you engage grunts will very precisely and very quickly kill you. And the guys that do like supply convoys, if they are not grunts, pretty notoriously just mag dump you. They just like, well, that'll be enough of your shit. Right?
Just open fire. Yeah.
Right. And so you end up with, there's not particularly a good set of Marines to go attack because the grunts, they'll all get out of vehicles and they're clear buildings and they'll be in there, shooting you in the face or whatever. Right. The supply unit and true story, it's I was in Afghanistan and some supply convoy got lit up by an RPK, which is the medium-sized machine gun, basically, right? And they're taking fire from this thing. And at first, they all just started bag dumping it, but he was dug in. And so they went, you know what, to hell with this. Call Artie on it. And that's the Marine Corps response. Like, bullets didn't do it. Go to shit that blows up. Right?
There's a good movie, Don, that I want to recommend to people called Danger Close, The Battle of Long Tan. And it was only made in 2019. It's one of the very, very few modern movies I can even stand to watch. And it's about the biggest Australian battle in the Vietnam War. And basically an Australian infantry company went into this rubber plantation in Longtan and were attacked by most of a main force regiment of the MVA. And why they survived, to a large degree, was their artillery support, which they actually had. They were in such a bad situation, they had to call it down almost onto their own position.
Yep. By the way, so danger close does not mean the same thing to guys who know Artie as it does to everybody else, right? Because you say danger close, and people think like 10 feet. Right. So for 155 millimeter artillery, danger close is 600 meters. Right.
Yeah.
Like it's far. Right.
Yeah.
And when you start talking about calling down artillery on your own position, I think one of the culminating portions of the battle is a guy who grabs a radio, jumps in a hole, and he says, "I'm right here. Shoot me." Right. Because they, it's like him and two other guys or something out of like a platoon is what, it's like him and two other guys is what's left. Everybody else is either scattered or shot or, something. And he unironically gives his own position and goes, "Yes, I know what I'm saying. Yes, do it." And by the way, important lesson if you ever happen to be on the receiving end of artillery, being below ground increases your chances of survival by 90%. So rolling into a hole, if you got to call artillery on your own position, that's what you do.
Yeah. It's quite like it goes along quite flat from where it bursts. Although also being flat will help you a bit.
Yeah. So it's something like 50% laying flat on the ground, 90% if you are enough that your nose is at ground level. It is a 90% because effectively the round has to hit you. Though we get all kinds of complicated with artillery nonsense about there's ways around that. And we do them, but
Don, one of my granddad's brothers was killed in North Africa in World War II from counter-battery. He was in the Royal Artillery, and he was like on a 25-pounder battery, and he was killed by Africa Corps counter-battery fire, and they didn't find enough of him to put into a shoebox.
Yeah,
basically. I mean,
yeah,
artillery is a combat art.
Oh man, people like if there's anything every artilleryman ever hates, it is Hollywood's artillery. Because you get just the dumbest stuff, and they're like a guy running along, and artillery has to land under his feet, otherwise he survives. Yeah. And the first time you ever see an arty round go off, you go, "Oh man, I've been lied to."
Yeah, absolutely correct. Yeah, I mean, like artillery is a combat arm, and when you fire at the enemy fires back at you for fucking sure. So there's one reason why you have this shoot and scoot policy. You shoot, then you move.
Oh yeah. If whoever you're fighting has, by the way, this goes back to the Ukrainian discussion very, very well because Mattis famously said, "I didn't bring artillery. I'm begging you with tears in my eyes, please don't fuck with me or I'll kill you all." And unironically, what he said is, "I didn't show up to level this place." Because that's what "I didn't bring artillery" means.
Yeah. What's your opinion of Mattis, Don?
Mattis is I
used to kind of like him, but since I've read quite some stuff I don't like.
Well, Mattis is a guy who should know what his skill set is, right? Like I love a bunch of my arty jarheads to death. I don't want them operating on me. Right. I want them shooting cannons if I need artillery support because I know they're good. I know they're fast. I know they're accurate. Right. But I don't want them, I don't know, like replacing my, pulling my spleen. Right. That's not a thing that I want under any circumstance. And that's Mattis's problem is that Mattis is very good at war and not very good at much else, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. I mean, what were people calling him? They were calling him some sort of warrior monk and this kind of stuff back in the day. It's not what I see from most of the Western very senior officers, because most of the Western very senior officers seem to be just like completely woke, in inverted commas, lefty feminist wanks.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of a better way to describe. I don't think Mattis was one of those, but
I don't either. And I know guys that worked for Mattis, and they, that to be fair, most of them worked for Mattis 10 years ago, right? And it's been a long 10 years, so maybe he is now, but he wasn't then.
Yeah, absolutely. The last 10 years. I mean, just look at our popular culture. Don, have you ever seen a US TV show called 1883?
I have seen like 2 episodes of it. Yeah.
The first 2 episodes, I presume.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And the first 2 episodes aren't terrible. Yeah? Right. There are bad bits about them, but they're not absolutely terrible. But I was unfortunate because someone who I like said to me, "Oh no, you should watch this show, Ted." So I watched all 10 episodes of it. Okay. And what this show is, I mean, first of all, 1883, like the West was pretty much tamed by 1883. Yeah, it wasn't the wild thing that they show you in that series.
No.
It wasn't. It was like the 1870s, yeah, absolutely, but not in the 1880s. But the second thing is, I mean, this is like my own reading, apart from this. But then you have this chick who is like, I don't know, supposed to be 17 or 18 or something in it, who is the main character, who is like a modern slut, basically.
Yep.
She falls in love and has sex with anybody. And apparently her mother and father are okay with that, which I just don't believe.
Very progressive of them for 1880s,
Yeah. I reckon they would have fucking like chained her up somewhere, but whatever. And she rides around in Europe, in Indian gear, and again, wouldn't happen in the 1880s. There's no way her family would have let them do that. And all the women are strong and powerful and ride the horses, and the blokes are only really there to support the women.
Yep.
It's not there protecting them.
So we only watched it because I watched it with a wife, right? And we
you should watch some of the later ones. They're so terrible.
So we watched the first 2, and there's been this like, do we want to keep going? Because the wife is over there within the first. I might have watched the first 3.
Yeah, the first 2 or 3 were not terrible, to be honest.
But we get to the point where she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna date this cowboy," and the wife is like, they knocked her over the head, put her in the back of one of those wagons, roped her ass, and left her there and told her not to be a whore. And I was like, I mean, you ain't wrong.
but 3 episodes later, the cowboy, spoilers, by the way, if you want to watch this show, spoilers. The cowboy gets killed trying to save her, right? And does in fact save her. Yeah, but then she has an affair with an Indian.
Oh, that happened.
Yeah. That was so common in the 80s. No one would have called her a whore. I mean, it's like fuck me dead, man. And like the Indians they do one attack in the whole series, but only because white men killed all their women and children. They would never have done it otherwise.
Yes. Well, clearly. Howard Zinn prevails.
Yeah, I mean, bastard. Honestly, yeah, and they never do anything except for that one attack, which was totally caused by the white guys. The white guys, on the other hand, are wandering all over the West, killing every wagon train they can find. Because we have so much history that tells us that happened.
Well, and this is the thing. Like, were there brigands? Sure.
Yeah, of course they were. They were bandits, yeah.
Right. But in the first episode, they're like, what city? I think they're down by Houston or something.
Yeah.
And like they make it 5 minutes out of town. And suddenly there's bandits everywhere. And I was like,
Yeah.
we used to have these things called sheriffs. We still have them.
Yeah.
And they used to be, they just shoot people for this kind of shit, which, by the way, is how you ended up with less people doing this kind of thing. Because it turns out not very many people are willing. And when you start shooting them, there's less of them.
Yep. Oh, and the German guy, you remember the German guy who couldn't speak English? He was the lead guy.
Yeah.
Well, he gets his leg cut off in about episode 9 or 10 because he gets bitten by a rattlesnake. And when he's absolutely drunk, because they get him drunk before they cut his leg off, which is fair enough. That is kind of what they used to do. Starts talking about when he was a German soldier in the Franco-Prussian War in 1870. But he can't fire a rifle when they start.
Right.
Like he was a German soldier in the War of 1870 against the French, but he can't fire a rifle in 1883 when the series starts. It's like,
So I went shooting yesterday, right? I've been out for roughly that amount of time. Turns out I still shoot just fine,
Yeah, it's like riding a bike.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of know how to do it.
You get there, and then you're there.
If you leave it for a couple of years, you'll lose some skill, but you won't take you that long to get it back if you know the basics.
Right? And it just, oh God, that's so dumb. God, that's dumb. So funny enough, right along the lines of, he's the only guy that speaks English when they're in the room at the beginning of the show, right? They nominate him as like translator, and then the black guy starts looking after Sam Elliott and the black guy start looking after that one lady because her husband died of something.
Yeah, eventually they finish up as the interracial couple.
Of course they do.
The gypsy woman, they're the interracial couple.
I noticed, by the way, she speaks English really well.
Yeah,
for a room full of people that didn't speak English.
Yeah, I agreed, absolutely. But no, they become the interracial couple. But as I say, but this is the one that really got me. Was when the cowboy was courting the bloke's daughter. Yeah, the main dude's daughter.
Yeah,
he punched him and knocked him on the ground, like you would expect a dad to do then if he was taking liberties with his daughter. In fact, even when I was a kid, that's what a dad would do if you took liberties with his daughter. But when the Indian bloke was fucking her out on the plains, that was perfectly all right. He never said a word.
Very progressive of him.
Yeah, just 1883, totally. I mean,
right.
And I mean, that's an off-spin of, what's that series called? Yellowstone?
Yeah, which is another. So I used to watch Yellowstone.
That's not progressive, is it?
Oh, yeah, it is.
I know it is.
Oh, man, it is. So I started watching that show, and it's the same deal, right? The first...
It starts off 2 or 3 episodes are okay. Then they bring in all the bollocks.
Yep. And sure enough, the Indian wife in that show too, because his daughter, Dutton's daughter, is an insufferable bitch.
Yep.
And just every minute of like one of the opening scenes.
She's actually English, Don. The redhead who plays Dutton's daughter is an English chick whose father was a cop.
Awesome.
It or not. Yeah.
But she's they open her up as I'm a big strong whammon who does big strong whammon things because she's strong arming some guy out of his company or something, and I'm like, all right, there cannot be that much more of this because we're already into stupid territory.
Then there's the lesbian couple who are killed on the river. I think very cool. And then there are at least 3 really strong black women who are like lawyers and very rich and
Yep.
And that's supposed to be not woke according to people I watch.
And see, and this is my problem, right? Is I don't watch that much TV because I can't fucking stand it.
Same.
And it's, you know, oh, Dawn, you should totally watch Yellowstone. And I watched the first episode and I'm like, okay. As long as we can stick to, the handful of characters that are pretty good here, like most of the, what are they called? The ranch hands stuff is pretty decent for the first season.
But then how many women and black guys and all the rest of it are ranch hands? And I can't believe there are many black ranch hands or many female ranch hands, even in the modern American West.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't believe there are many.
And this goes to another thing that piss off, I'm sure, half of YouTube is I am entirely done with the I grew up a farm girl, so I can bench press a truck. No, you can't. Just stop. No one believes you. And by the way, the only people who believe you are woke retards, right? So stop telling the rest of us because we don't care.
My old man was 5'9". Actually, 5'9" or 5'9.5". I can't remember. But he was an ex-British soldier, and he absolutely could chuck a 500 weight bale way above his head. But he was a bloke, not a woman.
Turns out it matters.
Yeah. All that testosterone gives you more muscle mass and all that stuff that you need. So we'll come on to this, Don, when we do our.
Yeah, we should save that for later. But
we'll do this stream on Thursday, and I hope we're going to talk about why are our supposed, and I do say supposed, political elites supporting this, because they're actually anti-us.
Yeah. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to. So, spoilers.
yeah, absolutely right. But I can't watch anything modern, Don. What was the last modern show you watched that you thought was even okay?
Deadwood, maybe?
Yeah, but even the last one of those was pretty crap.
I thought. When they made
that special they did was really
pretty garbage.
Yeah, but the series was okay. Yeah, I agree with
that. Probably Generation Kill. I think that's roughly the same time.
Yeah, that was a good show. There was nothing in that I hated, I have to say.
Yeah. The Pacific is pretty good. But I mean, it's really somewhat faithful war documentary things tend to do okay. Even if they're dramatizations, they tend to do okay. And oh man, other than that, I can't. You know what? Some of the Marvel stuff was okay for a while. Specifically, The Punisher was pretty decent for the first season. And then after that got ridiculous because, of course, it did. I can't think of Chernobyl. Chad is right. I still watch Chernobyl.
The Chernobyl series was okay. I agree with that. That wasn't terrible. I didn't mind that. If you're talking about the British series, it wasn't bad. And I did watch the Russian series, which was okay.
Yeah, the Netflix one, which is only good insofar as it is a demonstration of how horrible communism is. I mean, that's what it is.
The Russian one is more, which is more recent. He's only about 3 episodes. The Russian one is more like this brave fireman guy who can't settle down with a girl, but he decides to kill himself for this girl and a kid later on, who is his kid. But at least it is his kid. So
that does help,
rather than somebody else's, for God's sake.
Don,
I don't know, mate. I don't watch US adverts, but are US adverts? Are they the same as British adverts, where 2/3 of the couples that you see are a black man with a white woman?
Oh yeah. So I don't have cable TV, so I don't generally see them. But every now and again, I'll go out and get dinner or something, and there's a TV on the wall because that's a popular thing to do all of a sudden, or for the past 20 or so years. And so the whole family has taken to enjoying me going out to dinner because I will just sit and stare in complete awe at the television. Like, this is a real thing. This is actually like, what the hell's the? I don't even remember the name of the network anymore. But the sports channels, right? I went out relatively recently, we'll say, and the sports channels were on one of the various TVs that were plastered all over the walls in this place. And as I sit down, there's a black guy with a shaved head standing next to a sign that says "Social justice requires all of us" or some bullshit like that. And I went, "This is a sports channel. This is a network about sports. What the hell is going on?"
Yeah. I mean, I'm guessing, like, given your generation, which is a little bit younger than mine, in the U.S. Marine Corps, you would have had Black American comrades.
Yeah, a bunch.
And I'm guessing they wouldn't have been pretty much typical Black Lives Matter supporters or anything like
that. No, I mean, I no idea why, but fucking comm guys are all black or Portuguese or Mexican, and it's just that way. Like, you know, but it is a play like that thing that everybody talks about. They want where, like, you know, it doesn't really matter what your race is. I just need you to be able to do your fucking job.
Yeah,
that was the Marine Corps. You know. And they didn't start getting touchy about it until way later, because, you know, shenanigans started, and it was one of them clues that it's time to get out. But, you know, earlier on, it was, look, I need work done. You do work. We're all friends. Yeah. And that meritocracy ruled the day. And that was just it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was in a British London-based infantry regiment, and we had a few West Indian heritage black guys in our unit, many of whom had the nickname Chalky for Chalky White, and they didn't give a shit, man. I mean, you know, if you gave them shit personally, yeah, they'd hear you. If you didn't, then they were just part of the unit. Yep. Which, as far as I'm concerned, is absolutely perfect. You know, I've got to address this. Well, Alan Bastard MP. Sure, he was a Marine. Now, could you pass training chain smoking? Listen, mate. Who smokes the most out of me and Don? I think that would be really hard to work out. To be honest, I suspect it might even be me. But
that's the rumor.
Yeah,
so
I mean, it doesn't matter really, but yeah.
This is a true story. This actually happened. When I was in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, home of U.S. Artillery, they made you run PFTs to get Liberty, right? You had to have a first-class PFT to be able to go out on Liberty. And so I went and I ran my PFT and I got first class, and they lost the records. And so they told me the next week, you run another PFT. And I was like, man, shit happens. It's the government, whatever. So I ran my next PFT and I got a first class. And I came back and they went, oh, we lost the records. Right. And I was like, okay, now we're starting to run into a problem. This is getting dumb. Because they run the PFTs on Saturday mornings at 5. Right. So, you know, I enjoy drinking on the weekends with a bunch of other Marines as much as any other Marine does. And I was like, this is getting to be like, we can stop now. This went on for a month, right? And so at about the end of the month, I went, okay, well, I wonder what happens if I just fail. So I just went out and intentionally failed a PFT. and the dude that's running it is like, I know for a fact you can do more pull-ups than that, because the first event in the PFT is pull-ups. And I just got on the bar and I went 1, 2, and you have to do 3 to pass. And he was like, what the hell? And I was like, I've run like 5 or 6 of these things now. You guys aren't recording the score. So, like, yeah, I want to find out what happens if I fail. And he was like, That's not really a thing you should be doing. And I went, yeah, but if you're not going to record the score anyway, who gives a shit? Right. So sure enough, they lose the score. So the next week I go out and I run a PFT and I do, I don't know, 18 pull-ups or something, do my 100 crunches. And the third portion of the PFT for the Marine Corps is a 3-mile run. So I ran out to the halfway point and I ran halfway back and I stopped and I smoked a cigarette in the middle of a 3-mile run and I still fucking passed. So when you ask me if I could manage to do Marine Corps training while smoking, I think the answer is definitively, provably yes.
Yeah, most of us can when we're in our 20s. Smoking in your 20s doesn't kill you,
No.
It might kill you in your 60s or your 50s, but it don't kill you in your 20s. Craig H on says the tax on cigarettes kills me. Well, I smoke Chop Chop, which is untaxed cigarettes, so don't worry about them. It's about a third of the price.
Yeah, minimally taxed cigarettes.
It's about a third of the price, mate.
Yep. Same deal.
Yeah, and everyone. When I was in the army, everyone smoked. If the officer who was giving you a lecture on some bollocks would turn around and say, "You got 5 seconds to chuck me a cigarette, or you can't smoke."
Mm-hmm.
And if someone chucked him, and actually what would generally happen is 10 people would chuck him cigarettes.
Right.
Yeah. And then he would say, "Okay, you can smoke, boys."
Mm-hmm.
But that's just the way it worked.
Oh yeah, that wasn't any different when I was in. There's a bunch of guys well, I'm out of cigarettes, so I guess we can't smoke. And sure enough, a pack of cigarettes come flying one at a time at him.
Absolutely right. Yeah. Officers were ever good at doing that kind of shit. But, but yeah. I'm just trying to think, what should we get back to?
Probably Ukraine.
We should. Ukraine, the Ukraine invasion, if you want to call it that, because some parts of Ukraine were already pro-Russian, but it's been going on fucking 4 days.
Yeah.
I see no evidence that Russia is being pushed back, not winning. All of this, I reckon, is lefty liberal mainstream media cope.
Well, so somehow or another, in just the most magical way ever, there are basically no images or videos of Ukrainians taking serious casualties.
No,
right?
There's loads of Russian prisoners.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure how many of those are even true, to be honest.
Oh man! So most of those that have come out have been debunked entirely. I think there's one or two left that I haven't seen. The first Russian major or whatever was it was I don't know, a sergeant or something in the Ukrainian army that they had put on a poster board, and somebody was like, pretty sure this guy didn't just join the Russian military and get commissions,
Look, the Ukrainians have definitely put out stories about big Russian tank columns, Russian parachutists who are actually some of the best troops in the Russian army, and Russian generals who don't even exist.
Yeah.
So, that's going on for sure.
That's another thing is the paratrooper discussion that is going on with them. Russia's landing paratroopers and they're all getting smoked. And maybe they are. Being a paratrooper is kind of a dangerous job. Insofar as if you jump into a place where people have machine guns, it's target practice all the way down, Look.
But Don, as you know, mostly these days you tend to do that by helicopter, land somewhere away, and then advance.
Right.
Yeah.
But what is being put out there is that they're dropping people either right in or right next to cities, which, by the way, seems like a horrific tactical decision for exactly what Duke was just going over. Is no, you go out to the middle of the damn woods, you drop people there, and they walk in, right?
Yep. Oh, here's a good field. We'll land here and advance 1.5 kilometers that way, which ain't far for the military.
No. That might sound like it sucks to walk that far with a bunch of gear on. And that's because it does, but we do it all the time. So,
yeah. I mean, this is one of the things that gets me. Like, I watch stuff because I like military history, where people turn around and say, how on earth did the Greeks at Thermopylae carry 80 pounds of bronze armor? Look, every fucking Western infantry soldier today, and that includes people like the Marines and people like the Paras, always carry more than that, mostly.
Oh, yeah. I've talked a lot of times. Just body armor and ammo is basically 100 pounds.
Yeah.
And if you're a saw gunner, it's like 120 pounds.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, same way people do now. That's how they carry 80 pounds of armor.
And then you carry like an anti-tank weapon over your shoulder. That's probably fucking 30 pounds.
Oh, easily, by itself.
It's just people have no idea. This is why women can't do the military, because they can't carry this amount of kit and move fast enough.
Yeah. And look,
one reason. Sorry, there are others, but yeah.
Well, yeah. But I mean, there's a reason that if you were in a modern military, when you get out, your back and your knees are destroyed, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, I got this idea, Don. I don't know. When you were in, did you have the knee pads?
So they issued them, but if you weren't injured, like from something else, nobody wore them.
Yeah, because like when I was in, they didn't even exist. So I have two totally fucked knees. They really are totally fucked. And as Craig says here in the chat, a 120-pound Bergen and his weapon and his pack, but that was the 90s. Look, the weights you have to carry have not reduced.
No.
If you are a guy, let's say an infantry guy, but like with all due respect to Don, a Marine, either a US Marine or a Royal Marine or a parachute regiment bloke, because they're all basically infantry, really. It just like
specialized infantry.
It differs how you get there, but in the end, you're still the same bloke carrying all that weight. The 120 pounds, that's what you're going to be carrying.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe sometimes more than that.
Well, and just the gear that you absolutely 100% have to take is 100 pounds. You are taking probably between 5 and 10 pounds of water wherever you go. You are taking, if you're the guy that does, medical shit before whoever your medic is, you're carrying 50 pounds of that shit. You're carrying. And by the way, everybody in the military at this point is carrying an IFAC, individual first aid kit. And that weighs, I mean, they're like 2 pounds or something. But this is how everybody who's ever been in the military gets to saying ounces make pounds, right? Yeah. Because they do.
Yeah. And everything that comes out, almost every single thing that comes out that supposedly makes infantry able to more fight back against tanks or armor and all the rest of it is enormously large and enormously heavy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, man. So mortars guys, right? The base plate they're carrying is like 100 pounds.
Yeah.
Just a base plate.
Yeah. So land those guys as airborne or even as a Marine over the beach and then see how far you go.
Right. And there was the one great thing about Artie is that if you're doing towed artillery, you always have trucks, right? So all that kind of stuff, if you are moving from one place to another, ends up on a truck, and thank God for that. However, right, you still end up moving it around. You still do your own patrols, so you still end up carrying it. But I'm not going to kid you. I was sitting there one day watching a mortar platoon do a ruck march, and I went, never in my life do I want to carry specifically the base plate. And right after the base plate guy was a guy carrying a fully assembled 50 cal on his shoulder. And I went, I don't think I want to be that guy either.
Yeah. And then wait, Don, until like your battery starts getting fire, and people will say around and say, "No, we got to move, boys."
Right.
Know? And then you're trying to man all your guns.
Mm-hmm. And it's, you know, you got so there's a little pit that goes right next to the gun where you keep about 10 rounds, right? So they're ready rounds. They're able to go nice and quick. They don't have to come off trucks or anything. And so you know, one of those things that you do to that earlier counter battery fire discussion is shoot, and then, you know, everybody get out the stopwatches. How long until we're out of the gun position? And they want like there's a couple of ways to do it, but one of them is like under a minute, right? They want you out of the position, and you leave a bunch of stuff behind when you do that, but you are still carrying a ton of stuff, right? So you got like a guy down on the ground.
It's also better than like the enemy shells arriving while you're still there.
Right. You know, it's like you just get far enough away that you can come back and clean up whatever mess you made after those rounds hit, right? And, you know, after that, it's like 5 minutes or something like that. After that is, I think, 10 minutes. And the last one is 10 minutes to move 6 guns, 120 guys, about a couple dozen trucks, you know, a bunch of wire that you've laid all over the place. You know, everything you've set up comes down in 10 minutes, right? And
how much does a 155 millimeter gun weigh?
So it depends on the gun. The 777s are actually relatively light because they wanted them to be able to be flown around on helicopters.
But it's still tons, isn't it?
Oh yeah. I mean, it you know, the damn thing weighs probably literally a ton. Shit, I don't know if I remember. See, this is the kind of thing you forget when you get out.
Sail Away in the chat says 120 pounds, small woman on your back. I don't think 120 pounds is a particularly small woman on your back.
Right.
That's more like 90 pounds, but yeah, it's a woman on your back for sure.
Yeah.
But she ain't particularly small if she's 120 pounds. But yeah.
4,200 kilograms or 9,300 pounds. That's what 777s weigh.
Well, there you go.
I mean, you're moving some stuff.
Well, 3 guys ain't gonna move that
at all.
6 guys could probably move it slowly, I guess.
Yeah. So I've seen 6 guys move a howitzer. Now, I will grant you, one of them was every military's got this guy somewhere. The guy that like literally never does anything but weightlift.
Yeah.
And you know, he's 250 pounds of ridiculous muscle. And he was one of those 6 guys, and they moved around a howitzer.
He could well be gay, but yeah.
Right.
that was my experience, I have to say. Like if you're an absolute full-on weightlifter, you might be gay.
There is a strange correlation.
Yeah. But he would never tell you that, which, as far as I was concerned, was perfectly fine. I didn't care what he did in private.
Oh man! So this is another thing that that the military abandoned while I was in, is we got rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Yeah,
and the difference was substantial, right? Because there is sort of a reality that if you are gay in the age of social media in the military, I promise you everybody knows, right?
Yeah.
And what they don't want is for you to be running around having a San Francisco gay pride parade in the middle of the fucking military, right? That's it. That's all we're asking for. Just shut the fuck up.
With a pink tank, yes.
Mm-hmm. And that's it, right? And that was a bridge too far, right? Is like, look, I knew guys who like ridiculously religious that were like, no, gay people are going to burn in hell, and you know, fuck them. But in the meantime, got work to do, right? And that's how it went. But now you got to have, fingernail painted dudes wearing women's fucking uniforms, all this other stupid crap that's going on.
Sailor Way in the chat is saying, what percentage of Western women's weigh below 8.5 stone? Well, I have to say to you, Sailor Way, every single woman I've ever had a relationship with, every single one, with no exception, was less than 9.5 stone. Every single one.
Oh, stone's 14 pounds?
Yeah, it is.
So what is that? Like, that's about 120 pounds is what he's talking?
Yeah. He's saying an 8.5 stone, which is like 8.5 times 14. But, I've never gone out with fat women ever in my life. I just never did. It was something you didn't do.
I mean, people go whaling. What are you going to do?
Yeah, they do. But, I mean, it's not a good thing to do. Never done that. I mean, the heaviest woman I ever went out with was probably 9.5 stone. And she was 5'10", so she was like quite a tall girl. So she wasn't fat, So yeah.
Well, so social media is probably ridiculously to blame for this. Because if you look at social media, if there is a woman in a Western country, she's fat as hell. 300-400 pounds, right?
Mostly, yeah.
On the other hand, if you go to the store, there's a bunch of attractive women everywhere, right?
Absolutely true. Yep, totally true. I mean,
but then,
look, we had, I don't know if you had this in the Marine Corps, Don, but in the British Army, there's a thing called a double bagger. Now, that's a woman so ugly that not only do you put a bag over her head, but you put one over yours in case hers comes off. Yep. All right, we had those. All right.
It is. The names change, but the work stays the same.
Yeah. We did have those, but like I never did that. That wasn't my thing.
I mean, well, look, there is some reality that if you want to find the people anywhere in the world that are willing to have sex with anything, go find your local military, right? Because it won't be all of them, but there will be that guy, right? And you'll take that guy to the bar, and you'll be out working on picking up women, and you'll be talking to the hot chick that's got her fat friend, and your boy is over there like, yeah, you keep talking to her because I'm gonna get the fat friend. happens a lot.
Don, I'll tell you a good story. This is a good military story. One day I was in Bournemouth, which is not a place you would ever know. It's a south coast town in the UK, seaside town, and in the summer. And so we were given R&R, and we went there. We're all there in our Union Jack, like swimmers and all this kind of stuff. Because all the British Army used to wear Union Jack swimmers back then, your shorts. And we went to a nightclub in the evening, and I was chatting to this really quite cute chick. Like, she really was quite cute, but I was pretty drunk. And so I fell over backwards off my stool, as one does when one is too drunk. Yep. And you're pushing your stool backwards, and you're like, you're a bit pissed, So anyway, and she laughed her fucking ass off. And immediately I thought, okay, well, I'm on here, boys, because she thought that was funny, as you do. And anyway, this chick she was pretty hot, to be fair. And I walked out of this nightclub, and I got around the corner, and like 6 blokes wanted to beat the fuck out of me because they'd known this woman for ages, and this was some particular bloke's woman, etc., etc. And I was there for like about, I don't know, a minute, thinking I'm going to get beaten up here.
Right.
When all of a sudden, all 15 blokes or 16 blokes from my platoon who were in that nightclub came around the corner and said, "We've watched this, boys," and they all fucked off.
Oh, see, that's the other thing that happens, right? Because one of those things that you learn early in the military is when you're going to the bar, go with your boys. Because if you live anywhere near a military base, like chances are good every guy in that town fucking hates you.
Yeah.
Right. And they will start fights with you for no reason, and they'll come rolling like 10 deep. You're like, oh, you brought 10 guys, did you? Well, it turns out there's 40 of us. So how many did you want to fight? You know?
Yeah, no, the military has its advantages, man. Those guys walking around a corner was like General Custer suddenly arriving with. Right. I thought I was going to get beaten the shit up. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have given up, but I mean, you know, I wasn't going to win. There were 2 minutes.
6 dudes is a lot of people to just be beating the hell out of by yourself.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a winning fucking situation, but yeah.
Yes, man, the military has some good things.
It does.
I mean, do we think? And this is important, actually. Do we think we should advise younger people today to join Western militaries? Because I'm not sure we should.
And see, this is the problem that I have, right? Because there's some of what are you looking to get out of it, and if what you're looking to get out of it is what all of us talk about, I'm not so sure you should. And if you do, you need to be going like. You can't just be going for, hey, I just want to be a grunt, right? You can't just go to the infantry. But if you're, I don't know, you're going for, you know, the SAS or Delta or some other crazy nonsense, like
some SF,
yeah. Then, I mean, you'll probably find what you're looking for, and you'll come out talking like this with, you know, whatever it is that the SF guys are doing that makes them all SF guys, right? To add on to whatever the stories are. But if you are looking for, you know, like if your dad was a grunt and you're like, yeah, man, I want to go be infantry, it is not going to be the same.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's what. Like my son is an officer in the Royal Navy and not in the British Army, and the reason for that is because I watched Iraq and Afghanistan. And I could see that all the casualties we were taking there were pointless. Like, we were never going to win. We didn't want to win.
That was the problem, right?
Yeah. We didn't want to win.
You know, there's a line in like the end of Rambo, right? Where it's Stallone talking to the guy, Colonel Troutman, right? And he says, you know, we didn't want to win. They wouldn't let us win. And that most of my life, I never understood that line. Yeah. And about 6 months ago, I went, oh, gotcha. Okay. I get it. You know, and
I think it's more we didn't want to win than they didn't let us. But
I mean, not wanting to win starts a lot of they won't let us win. You know, all kinds of weird stuff starts happening. Like, shutting down all of artillery because it did its job, you know. There was a brief period while I was in Afghanistan where you needed a 1-star general to approve 1 artillery round. 1.
A brigadier.
Yeah.
Jesus.
And I was like, the fuck does a 1-star general know about whether or not we should be shooting artillery, right? Why, like, is he on the ground in the fight? Because if he is, he's getting artillery anyway. He's a freaking general, right? Like, hey, I'm a general. Shut up and shoot arty for me. Okay, fine. I mean, I'd have shot it for, you know, PFC retard, but, you know, throw your rank around if you want.
The only guy who can know that is the commander of the patrol.
Right. like, hey, I'm in kind of a shitty position. It would be pretty great if you could shoot artillery for me. It turns out that people are pretty judicious with that. Specifically anyone who's ever seen artillery land is like, maybe we shouldn't just shoot that at everything.
Yeah. No, I've never seen soldiers being like over about artillery, except maybe in a street fight, maybe. But like that's just because they want the building guy in front of them. So
I mean, I think part of the problem is that when you're shooting in training, right? Everybody involved will shoot until you run out of rounds. And look, it's a bunch of guys out in the middle of a field shooting cannons and or directing cannons to be shot and getting a bunch of explosions. Shock of shocks that everybody likes this, right? And so if you sit and you watch people train, right, it's like, how fast can you shovel rounds into a howitzer to blow stuff up? And if you think, well, they're going to do that to, I don't know, Kabul or something, right? Like, we can't have them do that. But the reason that you train,
you don't like,
the reason that you do that is it's the most intense, crazy thing you could possibly be doing. And the point is for it to be harder than whatever you're going to be doing in combat, right? So, like your 8th hour of shooting where you can't, you can't see straight anymore. Like you're like, oh man, I've eaten one cracker in the past like day and a half. Yeah, right. You're over there and you're worn out. You haven't slept in 3 days, whatever it is, right? All kinds of craziness. And you get to combat and like you kind of do nothing if you are doing shooting for like hours at a time. Because it turns out that like people don't actually need just a constant stream of artillery shells in real war. Right, but when you need it,
in a real counterinsurgency war,
right. And so, I mean, even in even World War II arty stuff, when you're firing a lot, but there's a lot of time where you ain't firing, and so
you're moving or whatever. Yeah,
and so I think part of it is that officers go down and they look at arty shooting and training and they're like, oh my God, they're just going to blow up the whole country. Right. Which, don't get me wrong. You want to call sweeping zone on a target, which is I'm going to delete a square kilometer from existence. I mean, I'll shoot it, I'll be happy to do it, but it doesn't happen.
I don't know. I think the modern officers for the look, it's been a truism in the British Army for a long time that the most dangerous thing in the British Army is a second lieutenant with a map. Well, that's the most dangerous thing in the British Army by a long way. Because they fuck up all the time. But I do believe that modern officers are just being taught stuff about feminism and LGBTQ stuff and just crap that has nothing whatever really to do with the job of being in the military.
Yeah. I argued with some guy a while back. He was talking about he was recon. And so it didn't matter what any of this was because his job wasn't going to change.
So he was a USM Marine Corps recon bloke, who I have a great admiration for because they're pretty similar to the Royal Marine Commanders.
Yeah. They're legit dudes, make no mistake. And I was like, look, dude, you need to understand that 10 years ago, that's what the infantry was saying.
Yeah.
Right. Like I was there when infantry and artillery were going, look, it's not our problem. This looks like Pogue shit. Right. It's their problem now. It will come for you. And he was like, it'll never happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Don, now I think I get you. You've been saying for ages that like, even if you're SF, eventually this is going to like take over your units. And I absolutely totally agree with you. It is. Yeah. That's the way everything is moving. Like you could be a US Navy SEAL, and in due course, this is going to take you over.
Yeah,
and give you 2 women in your unit, which will make you crap.
Well, and for those that don't believe, think it, oh, that's crazy. And I hear people do it all the time. Look at Dan Crenshaw.
Yeah.
He's really not against any of this. He doesn't like the transgender children thing. That's the defining line as far as I can tell. But after that, it's it's everything's the same and it's good. Bro, it's not the same. And you should know this.
Don, am I not right in saying that the US Navy now has an admiral who is a man pretending to be a woman?
As far as I know, that is true.
Yeah. I mean, World War II, like the likes of Halsey and all these great American admirals would have just said, what the fuck,
Mm-hmm.
But now
I don't know what that is, but get it out of the Navy.
Yeah. This was like when the US Navy was facing kamikazes and Japanese submarines and all the rest of it, and,
right.
and 18-inch gun battleships when they only had 16-inch gun battleships. But they would never have put up with some bloke pretending to be a woman in the US Navy.
Nope.
In 1945, it just wouldn't have happened.
No. And it's, who was that SEAL that Shapiro got famous because the SEAL grabbed him by the shoulder?
Don't know.
This is a while back now. Is when the transgender thing started. Shapiro went on some show and there was some guy that had got out of the SEALs and he was, I don't know, at least dressed as a woman or something like that, and was like, "You need to call me her," and all that. And Shapiro was like, "I'm not doing it." And the dude reaches over and grabs him by the collar and is like, "I'll see you outside." And he's like, very womanly.
I would have just punched the colonel at that stage, but yeah,
right. But this is that what we're looking for? Is that we need Navy SEALs dressed as women? Have we achieved enough woke at that point? Is it good enough? And the answer is, of course, no. Right. But you get the same thing everywhere, right? It is coming for everybody, and everybody wants to act like it's not coming for them. And I've watched too many places where, it'll never happen here, right? And then it happens there, and everybody's like, but it'll never happen in the next stage because that's too important, right? Like,
the British head of MI6, which is the security service, which is the British equivalent of the CIA, he's on Twitter with his pronouns being he, him. Jeez. And he is saying there, this is the bloke who, if James Bond was a real man, would be in charge of him. And he is saying the reason why Ukraine is important is because of LGBTQ rights.
Yeah.
These are the people who are supposed to be guarding our nations.
He's not alone, right? There have been a couple of guys from the Department of Defense out there doing it, and I just look at this, like, look, dude, I'm not a fan of any of it. On the other hand, if you were marching into America and killing all the transgenders, I'd still shoot you in the face because you're still killing Americans.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I get that. I totally get that. But it's like, it's not part of being an American to be LGBTQ. It isn't.
Right. Like, you are within confines of country. You are presumably American, even though most of you aren't. You hate the fucking country.
Do your own stuff privately, for fuck's sake.
But, are we really trying to sell the guys that we think are, supposedly the hardest that our nations have to offer? Because that is what we should be at least aiming for. Even if it's not what we're getting, it's what we should be aiming for all these people that we hand rifles and say, go kill people for us, right? You're going to go to all those guys and go, have you considered dying for gay people in another country?
Yeah.
No.
Look, I've watched you for ages, and I get the general impression the vast majority of the average, like what the Marine Corps calls grunts, would be Southern white Americans and quite a lot of guys from the Northern Rust Belt, and generally working class white American guys.
Yeah. So the two biggest states for recruitment for the United States Marine Corps are California, of all places, and Texas. And what California comes down to is the major cities are not great for numbers. But the way that they work that is that the rural areas don't have high recruiting numbers, and so they just send guys to the city to meet the city numbers, right?
Makes sense.
And the further out you get from major cities, like when I enlisted, recruiters, I enlisted in the middle of the damn surge, right? And recruiters were just turning people away left and right. We're like, just leave. And to the point that my recruiter was like, I don't know, like, I guess we'll see if we can enlist you. And I was like, I'm just going to fucking start camping in the office if you don't fucking fill out my paperwork.
Yeah, but you had a pretty, but Don, contrary to popular belief, particularly on AA's channel, for example, you had a very complicated job. But, let's not go on about that here.
Indeed. But it's, for all the, stuff you see about like Vietnam and Marine Corps recruiters, like Marine Corps is usually not hurting for numbers. They meet mission every month for like years now.
Well, it's the elite unit in America if you want to be some sort of infantry guy.
Yeah. And so, and oh my God, getting infantry is a pain. Like, it's almost impossible. There was a guy that was waiting on an infantry position to open. He'd been hanging around the recruiting office effectively for like 6 months. And they were like, well, when it comes up, we'll let you know.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a bit like the Royal Marines in the UK. Like the Royal Marines in the UK, if you want to be like the best of the best, that's what you join, is the Royal Marines. And after that, I hope some people would fucking kill me for this, but after that, you join the Paris. But yeah.
Well, our was it like airborne is somewhat the equivalent of that, and that argument happens here all the time.
Yeah. Listen, there's been some great punch-ups between all those units, but I don't know. If you're a US guy and you think, okay, I want to be like kind of an infantry dude, you're going to join the US Marine Corps because, 200 years of history, for fuck's sake. So,
and what, for all of it, there is a recruiting poster from Korea, I think, that is still all over the Marine Corps. And it is a guy in a drill instructor with a Smokey Bear, and he's standing in front of this dude, and he's got the knife hand out fully in this guy's face. And he's right up and he's yelling at him. And at the bottom it says, "We don't promise you a rose garden, United States Marine Corps." That's how the Marine Corps recruits people. All right.
Yeah. I mean, look, I have, I know that you're not a great fan of the modern American military, but like, I also know you're a great fan of things like the United States Marine Corps hymn, and because you kind of grew up with that shit. And,
not wrong.
Yeah, and I get that totally. I love my regimental marches and this shit from 200 years ago because they meant something to me when I joined the damn thing. So
and it's really, it's hard to explain, right? Because either and look, not everybody who joins the Marine Corps is like this, though. I will grant you, the vast majority are. There's a guy that writes a comic about the Marine Corps called Terminal Lance, and one of his like first 20 comics is a guy sitting in waiting for formation, because you do a ton of that. and he's talking about how much he fucking hates the Marine Corps, and this is all bullshit, and he can't wait to go on leave. And the next panel is him on leave at home, wearing Marine Corps sweats, singing cadence as he's running.
Do you know one of the things I liked about that series you like, Don? Generation Kill, is that like there's an NCO in that who is an intelligent dude who has read quite a lot.
Yeah.
He's not like your average how the media would describe a soldier.
No, not at all.
No, he's an intelligent dude who's read quite a lot, but he still decided, yeah, I'm going to do this, and he's a good dude, you know.
Yeah, and that's probably part of the thing that basically everybody likes about it is it's a pretty decent representation of how the military is, right? There's a couple of weirdos hanging around who say weirdo stuff all the time. The one guy, the other sergeant that's running around is always talking about how the white man is oppressing everybody, but it is obviously the craziest fucking jokes you've ever heard in your life. Like, you know what we need is we need a be the white man day where you go into his house and you eat his food and you just fuck his shit up. This has nothing to do with the conversation that's going on. He just walks by and says it, and you're like, you know what? That would happen. You know?
And then you get these wanker senior officers walk up and say, and they're looking at this bridge. There's only one way across this bridge. And they said, nah, you must go across this bridge. I've seen people doing shit like that.
Yep. Like, so this is a really bad idea. Could we just not do that? Nope. Okay. Well, I guess we're going.
Yep. But this wanker, he walks up there, he stands there for 5 minutes, and then he pisses off back to his rear area and says, no, you're going to take that bridge, you know. And all of the, like, your captain and your second lieutenants, they all, yes, sir, you know, boom. And off you go.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah, but civilians don't understand any of that stuff at all.
There's a point in that show where they're all sitting there, right, and they're strong pointing a city, and one of the dudes just goes, "Does it make sense to anyone that we're strong pointing a city in soft top Humvees while tanks and armored personnel carriers are rolling by?" And I went, in its own way, it kind of does to me.
I also like the scene where they have to charge the Iraqi base that has T-72 tanks in it.
Right.
And fortunately for them, they're not mad. Because otherwise they mostly would have all died.
we just ninja'd an airfield, you know? I mean, like, and that's another thing. People in the world of things that people don't believe, they're like, oh, like that happens in war. And I'm like, that happens in war all the time.
Often,
often. Like, hey, there's a machine gun nest with a mortar tube right next to it, and what the hell are we gonna do about that? There's no one there. What the hell?
Yeah,
it's just weird shit happens, and that's just how it is.
Oh man, I get told all the time that like my British Army stuff is shit. Because they did a full-on tour in Northern Ireland in the early 1980s.
That's a time to be doing a tour in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, well, actually, it wasn't that bad, Don. It was way worse in the 70s. But
yeah,
we lost one or two guys, I think, from my battalion.
Yeah.
Then I did an exercise in Denmark, and then because we were so fucking brilliant, they sent us on a Roman tour to Northern Ireland again. So the Roman tour difference was it was shorter. And you couldn't, the married guys couldn't take their women and kids. But yeah. So that was my British Army stuff, which was like, and then like peacetime was in front of us, and I wasn't fond of peacetime soldiering, I have to say.
No. Look, no one is. That there's no matter how much, because it doesn't matter where you are in the military or when. You could be in the middle of a damn war, literally, and people are still like, your shave is not good enough. And you're like, I'm kind of busy right now. you know?
Yeah. No,
but
we
once you get to peacetime, once you get to peacetime, then it's not just that like you've been up for 3 days and you haven't shaved. Then you're standing in a formation in front of a fucking barracks and someone is inspecting your chin. Right?
Yeah.
And you're like,
absolutely.
What are we doing? Like, I'm pretty sure I am an adult male who knows how to shave. Get the fuck away from me.
Yeah, no, that was my opinion entirely. So I moved to South Africa, and because I knew some guys, because I used to go to South Africa for like running military history tours and stuff like that. I knew some guys who were citizen force, which is kind of like the National Guard in America, I guess.
Yeah.
And they said to me, Ted, which is my name, we need guys who are trained infantry soldiers, because they were fighting in Southwest Africa. So I got myself in the world's last colonial war, which we won every battle and lost the war. But there you go.
I know that feeling. Because this is, I keep trying to tell people, man, people, American military lost in Afghanistan, blah, 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 right? Like, well, not really.
You all ran away. You all ran away, Don. Except you didn't, because you weren't there. You'd all fucked off.
Right. This is, but like, okay. If your country hangs around long enough, America will get tired of being there and leave. Okay, fine. Whatever. Go examine any military engagement that America had in Afghanistan in 20 years. And if you search long enough and hard enough, you can find stories like 2 Green Berets getting overrun by hundreds of Taliban. Hundreds. You can find there's a guy that just got awarded the Medal of Honor a couple years ago, and most of his platoon, I want to say, got killed. And that, I mean, look, did we take casualties? Yes. Did we? Even that battle, right, in which most of his platoon gets killed. In the end, what we did is go back and just kill a shitload of those people, right? Because if you want to start talking about what it's going to look like to engage the American military, understand that at least for another decade or two, it is going to be more hate and discontent than you've ever seen in your entire life. Stuff is going to blow up everywhere. And at the end of it, everybody that the American military wants dead will be dead.
All right, Don. First of all, I'd say same thing pretty much for the British Army or the Royal Marines in Afghanistan. They never lost an actual fight.
Right.
But I think you might be a bit optimistic in the next decade or two.
Maybe. I've been saying 2 decades for a long time now.
Yeah, so. I wonder about that, mate. I really do. I just think like we'll talk about this on Thursday, of course, but
yeah,
I just think the feminization of our forces is like going so fast.
Yeah,
it
is.
You would have all right. You're an artillery guy, okay? But if you were a infantry dude with like, I don't know, a 30, 40 bloke platoon, and you have 20 women in it, that is not going to work. It's just
a big problem.
It's not going to work, man. And actually, I don't even think it will work in the artillery, but it certainly ain't going to work in the infantry.
Yeah, this is the thing is, there's already indications of this, right? You know, basically any Marine you ever find will be more than happy to yell at you if you call it the Marine Corps, right? Because it's not a corpse, it's a corps of Marines. Who knew, right? And a Marine Corps is something that you have to go shoot someone because it got created, right?
That's a dead man, yeah.
Yeah. And even, you know, I got out about a decade ago, and while I was in, I sat and I watched some fucking stupid broad read an award as the Marine Corps, and there was a first sergeant next to her, and this dude is losing his mind, like it, you know. The military in general is pretty, you know, like military bearing, right? You need to not look like a fucking spoiled child all the time. And this dude's over there, yeah, right. You know, it's Corps. It is the Marine Corps. And I went, if I said that in a way that was not an obvious arranged joke, somebody would be kicking my ass. Somewhere. They come flying out of a fucking wall just to beat my ass for calling it the Marine Corps. Is that what's happening to her? No, of course not.
Woman, man. Special rules.
Exactly. And, you know, high standards matter, right? And that might not sound particularly high to you, but it goes along with about 40,000 other things that are the Marine Corps.
Yeah, right? No, it is a high standard. It's like there's a self-respect level.
Indeed, right? And it's really hard to explain because, you know, when you get out, there's no standard for anything, right? This is how you get guys being like, I fucking hate civilians, right? Because there's no standard for anything.
Listen, I have come close. The reason I did this stream is I have come close to hating civilians, but it's not fair because they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's why I did this stream, to just give people a few little clues about like actual military stuff. So that, you know, Russia not winning in 4 days in an enormous country the size of Texas,
right,
doesn't mean Russia is losing.
No. There's a theory that I heard proposed on the first day of this, that Putin is going to the Dnieper River, stopping, and then trying to keep the eastern side of the country and keep the western side of the country out of NATO and friendly to him.
That's exactly what I think. Yeah.
It's not an unreasonable theory at all. And the way he is fighting this, that's what it looks like.
Yeah. And he doesn't want to kill thousands of like Ukrainian civilians, because if he does, the rabidly anti-Western media will start screaming war crimes. And he's obviously got look, there were traffic jams miles long going to the Polish border, etc., that the Russians could have bombed the shit out of if they wanted to kill civilians. They don't.
Yeah. And that's another thing, right? Is that we are broadcasting, like, if they were killing civilians, what we are doing every time we play one of these videos on, you know, CNN or on Twitter is effectively broadcasting troop locations. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a time delay there. You know, it's not going to be perfect intel, blah, 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 blah. On the other hand, send a jet over there and find out, like, oh, hey, this is roughly here. Find out what's still there, whatever's there, make it not there. And it's over.
Yeah. I mean, look, in the 1982 Falklands War, when the parachute regiment were going to attack Goose Green, the Bias Brainwashing Corporation, i.e. the BBC, they actually told the Argentinians before it happened they were going to do that.
Yeah.
Which to me, like, is treason. But
I mean, seriously though, what are you doing? But then again, things like morale absolutely do not matter to civilians. It doesn't make any sense to them. They don't understand. And the media is an order of magnitude worse, right? Because it turns out high morale is actually like a really important deal.
Yeah. Yeah, if you think you're in the best unit, in the best military in the world, you kind of perform better.
Mm-hmm. And that's just how it goes. Like, even if what you've got is like, hey, and by the way, this is why the military competes over everything. Is like, hey, there's 10 battalions on the street, and we're the best one.
Yeah.
Right. you know. But
if you're in the British Army, the best battalion used to be the 57th Foot, the diehards. Eventually, it became the Queen's Regiment, and these days, because it's been so diluted, it becomes the Princess of Wales's Regiment. Which, when we became that, all of us who were Queen's Regiment called the Royal Horse. But there we go.
Yeah,
that was more about Diana than our regiment. But
yeah.
But I and if I was a Yank, U.S. Marine Corps would be like, who's better than U.S. Marine Corps? Well, I can't think of anyone.
Right. After that, you got to get real specific. So.
Absolutely, Don. Listen, Don, we've gone 2.5 hours. Unless you've got anything else to bring up.
No, I was just thinking the same thing.
We've covered most of this. I would just say to people who are watching this, because we still have a reasonable number of viewers, on Thursday, I'm not quite sure what time it is. What time is it? US time, Don?
7 Central, 8 Eastern, I think is the scheduled time.
Yeah, it's a Greenwich Mean Time stream. So it's a Zulu time stream if you're military. We're going to be talking about why are our so-called elites in inverted commas, totally supporting the increasing feminization of our military.
Yep.
So we'll talk about that then. Don, many thanks for coming on, mate, and go well. And I look forward to speaking to you on Thursday. And what is it you guys say? Semper Fi. There you go.
Semper Fidelis.
There you go.